Hey folks, this is Catherine, and I wanted to talk today about covering your head in the SCA. One of the things that's really common in period and less common, generally speaking, in the society is covering of hair. Unless you're one of those, Italians, most adult married women throughout the standard period of the SCA were some kind of head covering. And you kind of look at all of the art, and sometimes it's like, well, it looks a little frumpy, it looks a little weird, and that's, a very modern response, and it's very understandable. But adding a little bit of linen to your head can go a really long way to making your whole look kind of pull together and feel more period. And it doesn't have to be too complicated. There are a lot of different ways to cover your head that can adjust to your comfort level and are appropriate for a lot of times and places, because there's a lot of simple shapes, simple garments that kind of stick around for centuries. And so you can, make yourself a veil and use it for a couple different impressions or a couple different personas. So I'm going to talk about a couple different kinds. This might turn into a couple videos. I'm not sure yet. I'm doing this off the cuff. So one of the simplest head coverings, and one of the earliest ones, is the head rail. A head rail is a really long, 2 yard by half a yard, a little over half a yard, rectangular scarf. You'll see this with the Saxons, you'll see this with a lot of period, but with that, all you're going to do is put it over your head, throw it over your shoulder, if you're feeling real fancy and you're entitled to wear it. You can throw a circlet, metal, again, if you've got the right to wear it in the SCA. You can also use a fabric or trim circlet to help hold it. And the look is great. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it for my own use because I have super slick, straight hair. So it just falls off my head all the time. But it is easy. It's easy to make. I actually, I cheated. I used a machine. I serged the edges so it doesn't fray. It's not even hemmed. It is just serged in a matching thread. If you want to start with hand-sewn garments or start with making your own stuff, veils are great for this because, again, they're mostly flat shapes. And if you learn how to do a hand-rolled hem, that is a beautiful finish. I am lazy. Most of mine are machine hemmed because I'm lazy and I want to get them done. So the head rail is a nice early one that actually sticks around for a long time. So you can see that for a couple centuries. But where I play and where I do most of my stuff is sort of end of the 13th and into the 14th century, which is when you are full-fledged, I am a boat in full sail, kind of look at all the linen on my head. And when it comes to putting all that linen on your head, you're like, well, it's going to move around like crazy. And so this is the key to covering your head with veils. These little fabric noodles, and I just dropped all of them on the floor as I was grabbing this one. These little fabric noodles, which I just take scraps of linen from other projects, like, oh, I've got a scrap left, and the ends are ugly, right? They just sort of taper off. I cut them around 2-3 inches wide. I make sure they're long enough to fit around my head with some extra, and I just sew a tube and turn it right side out. I don't hem. It's super fast. The reason I have so many is because I lost some before an event, and just made new ones. I'm like, oh, whatever, I'm just going to shove them through the machine. So these little noodles are key to wearing a pile of veils at an archery event when the wind is going and not losing your head. In period, you'll see them called a fillet or a barbette, but tubes. And so you have these little tubes, and they're going to go in two places. You can do it with just one tube. I have found it is much less stable to just use the fillet. I really recommend, if you're going to use fabric noodles to secure your veils, that you make two. The most period way and the most secure way is to have one going around your head and one going under your chin. And the barbette, which is French for little beard, was very fashionable and very popular. It's also really good for hiding that little wiggle under there. But sometimes you don't want it, or you're sensitive to stuff touching your neck. So it works almost as well if you dress it in the back. Today my hair is just in a braid because I didn't do fancy hair, but you can style and dress your hair in different ways. You can have a braid, you can have two braids, you can have a low bun. What's very popular in the time period I kind of play in is to dress the hair to the temples, to the sides of the face, either curled in ram's horns or looped in little dog ears, so you kind of get some width at the face. That will change how your veil sits, but it doesn't change the principles of putting it on. So I'm gonna show you how I put on my veil after I've already talked for 7 minutes. So with this, I'm going to take my little noodle, and you can either, I make these long enough to tie, but you can also use pins. I've got a mix of pins here. I have some regular, cheapy, I don't care if I lose them, quilting pins, but I also have a collection of lovely glass-headed handmade pins from the Treasury. If you want to get nice veil pins, the Treasury has great ones. The ones that people see are my nice pins. So, you are going to take the fillet, and it's going to sort of go right at your hairline, and it's going to go around the back of your head, and it wants to go underneath the bump. There's that bump at the back of your head. I'm just going to tie this because, as said, I'm lazy and it's easy. So I just tie it in a little square knot. Then for the barbette, as said, you can do it in the back of the head or in the front. It's more period for me for it to be in the front and for it to be visible. So what I'm going to do, and I take the seam, and the seam is going against my skin, and pulling it up to the top of my head, and I'm folding the ends over. This one I don't tie because I don't want to create a weird little lump at the top of my head, but you want to drop your chin so that you can open your mouth the entire way with this in place. The last thing you want to have happen is get all of your stuff in place and then realize that you cannot eat the bread at feast, because, I mean, we're all about bread, right? Look at me, I'm all about bread. We love bread. So I'm just gonna take a pin and pin that around. Now that I have it pinned around, I kind of look like I've got some funky head dressing. I am also going to pin the two bands together where they meet. A lot of pins now save you a lot of grief later. So, pinning them together. If you have a really nice crispinet or snood, a hairnet basically, to dress your hair in, you can actually be done Now, you can have all your hair up in the snood and pin all the stuff in place. And it's a look. You do see just that in period. But, as said, I like to look like a boat. So, what I'm going to do next is I am going to add both a veil and a wimple. I have two wimples that I use. The first wimple is made out of silk. I did not make this one. I bought it on, it was like a $10 silk scarf. And I like it a lot because it's sheer, and it's drapey, and it's pretty. Because, well, it's pretty. I also made this one because silk, even when it's sheer, silk is warm. Silk holds a lot of heat. The linen breathes a bit more. The linen one is around 16 inches by 40, 45. And so either way, once again, you want to drop your chin, right? And you're going to pull it up to the top of your head. So it's kind of sitting on that top band. And you can play around with it. You've got the ability to, you know, pin it in the back, do what have you. I'm just going to do a nice, easy and quick little drape with this. And I'm going to stick in a straight pin. It's going through the band, and now I don't have to think about it. It doesn't add a lot of heat, in part because it is linen, and in part because it is white. Head linens are almost universally white. There are exceptions. There's exceptions to everything. But the whiteness and fineness of your linen is a really good way of showing off your wealth, because, you know, it takes a lot of effort to keep white linen really white. Also, linen doesn't like to take dye. You do see silk veils and wimples. You also see fine wool. So I've got this pinned at the top of my head. Then I'm going to pick my veil for the day. And you have a couple basic veil shapes. You have big squares. You have semicircles, which are straight and then curved. Then you have full circles. All three of these are made from handkerchief weight linen, and they just have a simple rolled edge. I have some with a linen cotton blend. I don't particularly care for them. The cotton has a bit more stiffness than the linen, and so I don't find them as drapey. These ones I think have a more graceful fall. Silk is beautiful. But again, one, silk is expensive too. I overheat in silk, so linen keeps me happy. So, most of the time I use either my half round or my round. I don't use my square one very often. That's personal preference. And the big difference between the round and the half round or the square is the shape it's going to form around your face. The round veil, when you put it on, will form a lovely little ruffle that kind of waterfalls around your face, while the half round or the square, that straight edge will form a closer fit around the face, so you don't get the little ruffle. Either way, whether you are doing a half round or a round, you want to pin your veil in at least 3 places. And that's why when I buy little sets of pins from the Treasury, I get 3 matching ones. So, you want to pin, and you see I kind of throw in a little pleat, and the little pleat helps it sit better. but you want to pin at those intersections at the temple. And let's do purple today. And you're going to pin through the veil and through your bands, away from your face. And we're going to pin the other side. It's weird doing this in a camera versus a mirror because you're kind of reversed. You're going to pin the other one away from your face. And then you are going to pin right at the top. Now you can be done, and let me tell you, this will stay all day in the wind. It is going nowhere. But if you want to dress it up, there are a couple ways of dressing it up. I have a circlet. I like to wear my circlet. So you can put your circlet on, which I am tilting because I'm telling you the camera's disconcerting. So you can do a circlet. Another fun thing is to add a toque. You can have colored ones. White is also really popular for these. Sometimes they're called coffee filter hats because we'll see a lot of toques with a little ruffle along the top, so they look like those little coffee filters. But you can slide on. I cannot get dressed in a camera because everything's reversed. There. So you can put on your little toque, give yourself some flair, but this couple pins, a little bit of fussing, and it will stay all day outside in high winds. So that's just sticking some stuff on your head. That's all. Thanks a bunch. Bye.